people acting dangerously in a way that killed over 500,000 Americans. And Caddy K, you listen to what Deborah Burke said. Somebody that had a very strained relationship with Donald Trump and also a strained relationship with the media. And right now, obviously her legacy is divided. If you just look, she's got harsh critics attacking her. But Deborah Burke said, again, somebody that was inside during all of it, she said, you know, the first 100,000 deaths after the coronavirus hit, well, you know, that was the first wave, and there wasn't a lot that many scientists thought we could do about that. But it's the next 450,000 that the Trump administration may be culpable for. If we had acted more swiftly, if we had acted more responsibly, a lot of those lives could have been saved, and all of those deaths could have been mitigated and greatly reduced. I mean, that's a hell of a stinging indictment on Donald Trump.
Yeah, and the fact that you have these senior officials coming out so soon after the end of the Trump administration and slamming his leadership on this and saying nobody in the White House took it seriously. It was known within the White House that you weren't meant to be wearing a mask around the White House because the president didn't want that to be seen. And you're right, Burks has a complicated legacy here because she also went on television early on in the pandemic and said
September 1st, 2019. Lori and her brother Alex Cox moved from Arizona to Rexburg, Idaho, with Lori's children, JJ and Tylee. Rexburg is just a few miles from Salem, Idaho, the home of Chad Daybell, her future husband and co-defendant on charges related to her children's disappearances. September 8th. Lori, Alex, JJ, and Tylee go to Yellowstone National Park for the day. Police say this picture is the last verifiable sighting of Tylee alive. Lori had told friend Melanie Gibb that Tylee is taking classes at BYU, Idaho, but records confirm Tylee was never enrolled. September 19th. Melanie Gibb and her boyfriend visit Lori for the weekend. Lori tells Gibb that JJ has become a zombie. Gibb later tells police nothing seems unusual about his behavior. This is the courtyard where JJ is seen on camera playing with neighborhood kids. But in September, according to police, the children would go missing. September 22nd, the last verifiable sighting of JJ by Melanie Gibb and her boyfriend in Lori's home. November 5th, Lori and Chad tied a knot in Hawaii. November 26th, Rexburg police get involved with the search for the kids at the request of police in Gilbert, Arizona. Rexburg police knocked on this door, conducting a welfare check requested by JJ Ballow's grandparents. Lori told police that JJ was with a friend in Arizona. But when that story didn't check out, the police returned the next day with a search warrant, only to find Lori and her new husband Chad Daybell were nowhere to be found. December 20th. While Lori and Chad are back in Hawaii, Rexburg police announced JJ and Tylee are officially missing. January 3rd, 2020, authorities execute a search warrant on Chad Daybell's property. March 6th, Lori has her first court appearance in Rexburg on felony desertion charges after being arrested in Hawaii. June 9th, police and the FBI return to Daybell's property and discover human remains in a field behind the home. Later, Chad Daybell is arrested and charged with felony counts of destruction or concealment of evidence. June 13th, authorities confirm the remains belong to JJ and Tylee.
All right, we've got a status conference on April 7th and a trial date of July 12th. And, of course, we will be tracking that right here on your front row seat to justice.
After that happened, did you see what the officers did? Well, let me back up a little bit. At some point, did you learn that there were more than those two officers at the scene?
That is correct.
When did you learn that?
Once the ambulance have arrived, I did notice that there was more than one officer. Two officers, I say.
So where did you see, how did you see these other officers?
Once they started to load Mr. Floyd onto the straddle to, not to know the technical name of it, but they put him onto the little bed thing.
The gurney or the stretcher?
The gurney, correct. Yes, sir.
And then when they did that, you saw these other officers? Where had they been, or where did they come from?
They were on the bottom side of Floyd, trying to get his feet to the gurney, and yeah.
Then you were able to see them?
Correct.
And after Mr. Floyd was put into the ambulance and the ambulance left, did you stay at the scene for a little while?
That is correct.
Okay, so right after the ambulance left, did you see where the officers went?
That is correct.
Where did they go?
They proceeded to cut to the other side from the store, which is 38th Chicago this way. So they proceeded to go towards 38th and proceed to go away from the scene.
And were you still in that same emotional mindset?
Yes, I was very lost at the moment, and very nervous and not knowing what to do. And, yes.
And did you, in fact, stay around at the scene for a little while?
Yes, I did.
At some point, did you make a 911 call?
That is correct. I did call the police on the police.
And why did you do that?
Because I believe I witnessed a murder.
And so you felt a need to call the police?
I felt the need to call the police on the police.
Now, there were police there, right?
There were police there.
Okay. Why didn't you just talk to them about it?
I believe that they didn't. We just didn't have no connection. You know, I spoke to them, but not on a connection of a human being relationship.
Did you, believe that they were involved?
Yes, totally.
And so, when you made that 911 call, about how long after the ambulance left was that?
Time regulation, I don't know.
A matter of minutes?
Minutes, seconds. Not too long after they retreated to the other side of the street, I proceeded to call the police.
And prior to today, have you had an opportunity to listen to a recording of that 911 call?
Can you please repeat that question?
Prior to coming to court today, did we play for you a copy of that 911 call, a recording of it?
I will not say yes or no. I cannot remember at this moment.
If you heard that today, would you be able to recognize it as the 911 call that you made?
That is correct.
We have now marked that as Exhibit 20, and Your Honor, we would ask that it be, we are offering it now as Exhibit 20.
20 is received.
All right, so if we can at this point, then play Exhibit 20.
2020. 911 with the other emergency.
Officer 987 killed citizen in front of a Chicago store. He just pretty much just killed this guy that wasn't resisting arrest. He had a dude neck the whole time. Officer 987, the man went stopped breathing. He wasn't resisting arrest or nothing. He was already in handcuffs. And pretty much just killed the dude. I don't even know if he's damn sure, but he was not responsible. The ambulance that came and got him. And the officer that was just out here left, the one that actually just murdered the kid in front of everybody on 36, 38th in Chicago.
Would you like to speak with the sergeant?
Yeah, like that was bogus. This is history, man. He was unresponsible. He wasn't resisting arrest for any of them. why did they get in there watching in front of us as well? I just told him to check the later phone, but he didn't even check the phone. Okay, one second. I have reached the city of Minneapolis to reach someone in a property college position. Murderers, bro. Murderers, dog. Murderers, bro. Can you have a start first thing? Yes, that's right. Yeah, man. So I want to send a supervisor.
Is that an accurate recording of the call you made?
That is correct.
And at the beginning, you referred to Officer 987. Where did you get that number from?
Honestly, it just visually popped in my head. Like, I looked at his badge, and that's what I read on his badge.
And so, whose badge, which officer were you referring to?
The officer.
And was that also the officer that had his knee on George Floyd's neck?
That is correct.
For the record, in your previous answer, you were pointing to the defendant, Mr. Chauvin.
That is correct.
And so the purpose in making, what was the purpose in making that 911 call at that time?
I just felt like that was the right thing to do. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know what to do. But call.
I'm sorry, I cut you off.
But call.
And the response then was to transfer you to a sergeant, correct? And then at some point the call, it sounds like you're talking to Officer Tao. Do you recall if you were actually talking to Officer Tao at that point?
That is correct. I was. Because at the moment that I was making the call, he proceeded to like intimidate me and stick his camera in my face, body cam.
Okay. And the call sort of ends abruptly. Did you hang up and terminate the call?
I'm not 100% sure, but I may have hung up during the actual happening in front of the store.
And then from there, after hanging up, did you stick around for a while and talk to some other people there?
Yeah, I went to do my own investigation.
Your Honor, I have no further questions. Morning, sir.
Good morning.
Can I ask what you're looking at?
Just notes or something.
Okay. I'm going to ask that you put those to the side, okay?
Go, please.
All right. Thank you for your patience yesterday. Thank you. Can I ask what you're looking at?
Just notes or something.
Okay. I'm going to ask that you put those to the side, okay?
Go, please.
All right. Thank you for your patience yesterday. Thank you for being here this morning. I just have some follow-up questions for you, all right? You testified yesterday that you started wrestling in the 7th grade. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And over time, you were talking about how you learned how to control your body weight, right?
That is correct.
And one of the things that you kind of talked about was, like, early in your instruction in wrestling, you call it, I think, flow wrestling.
That's correct.
And as I understand that, correct me if I'm wrong, flow wrestling is kind of learning how to kind of keep your center of balance, learning how to, sometimes it may feel you should use your arm when you should really use your leg. Kind of just learning how your body works, right?
Yeah, correct. Less resistance.
Less resistance. So sometimes less resistance is actually better in certain circumstances.
Repeat that.
Sure. I mean,
you're on the mat, right, and your instinct is to push your arm out to the side to try to use your body weight to roll, you may want to actually use your leg to roll the other way, right? Kind of like flow.
Kind of, but not really.
Okay. How would you describe just the flow of wrestling?
Flow is less. Flow is more. I'm flowing with you without using my strength. I'm flowing with you on 50-60% of it. I'm flowing with you, letting you get into a half Nelson, and you feel the half Nelson. You're in it, and now you're flowing. Your partner's letting you flow off your back. You get into a position where you get to stand up and to escape. Flow is where my partner's letting me get in on a double, and I'm letting him finish the double, and now I'm flowing into my offensive or my defensive position and getting away. So different.
Right. So you're learning how to use your body weight against the weight of the other person. You're learning how to just get in and out of moves, right? Flowing. Right. And that's something that you learn, at a young age in the sport of wrestling.
Correct.
And as you continued your wrestling career, you testified that you wrestled all the way through high school and then into college for a couple of years as well.
That's correct.
And you would agree that wrestling is a sport.
Wrestling's a lifestyle.
Okay? There are rules, there are points, there are referees. So there's a sport to wrestling, right?
Correct.
And I understand as a wrestler, it's a lifestyle, right? But to the kind of the casual observer, maybe it's just a sport, right?
Correct.
All right. But you're learning how to keep your center of gravity lower and grapple with people.
Correct.
Right? And then you testified that after you kind of got out of college or finished your career in college, that you started moving more towards the mixed martial arts, right?
Correct.
And so you were training in jiu-jitsu, I believe you said?
That is correct.
All right. And again, jiu-jitsu is a form of martial arts, right?
Correct.
Lots of forms of martial arts, right?
Correct.
Judo, karate, Krav Maga, these are all various forms of martial arts that you have some general familiarity with, right?
Correct.
But your training is specifically in jiu-jitsu, correct?
No. I'm a martial artist. I train jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, stick fighting. Like, I'm a martial artist. I don't just train jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
In boxing, wrestling, all is put into one. So as a fighter, you're not just working on the ground game. You're working on your stand-up. You're working, your Muay Thai, your kickboxing, things like that. That's what a martial artist is.
Okay. So you incorporate several forms of martial arts into what you studied.
That is correct.
All right. And again, the notion of a chokehold is very common within the martial arts community, right?
That is correct.
Submissions. And there are many forms, right?
Correct.
Like the triangle or the rear naked chokehold, all sorts of different types of chokeholds or submission holds that apply.
That is correct.
All right. And again, I understand that martial arts is a lifestyle, but there is a sport to it as well, right? Right. And I'm just talking generally, I'm not talking about the MMA fighting yet, but just even as a martial artist, there are competitions with rules and referees and things of that nature.
That's correct.
All right. And whether you wrestle or you compete in the martial arts, there are weight classes, right?
That is correct. Well, yeah, that's correct. MMA has weight classes. Jiu-jitsu tournaments, there's open weights. So you win your weight division, you have a chance to wrestle in open division, which usually if I'm competing in just a tournament, I'll do it in an open division, which is open weight.
All right. So again, generally, like looking at your career as a wrestler, what weight did you wrestle at?
I wrestled anywhere from 106 to 141 in college.
Okay. And when you would competitively wrestle, you would wrestle with other people who were in that same weight class, right?
Correct.
And then in the martial arts, in the competitions for the martial arts, there are weight classes, but there's also this open weight class, right?
That's correct.
And in jiu-jitsu, and so you, as a 141-pound guy, may wrestle years ago, you testified that you started with mixed martial arts.
Just repeat that, please.
I believe that you testified yesterday that about 10 years ago, you began training in mixed martial arts.
Correct, martial arts. Yeah, we like tennis.
MMA.
Yeah, MMA, mixed martial arts.
All right. And maybe I'm confused, like, of your progression? So you go from wrestling to boxing to mixed martial arts?
So I went from wrestling in college to training in a martial arts school, which covers martial arts.
Okay.
Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, boxing, mixed martial arts, wrestling.
And that's because there are some, there are some businesses or gyms that will train in a specific form of a martial art, right?
Correct. You have some that just do boxing. You have boxing gyms. You have jiu-jitsu gyms. You have Muay Thai gyms.
Or Krav Maga.
Whatever, anything, stuff like that. You have different specialty of martial arts with different schools. But some schools, one of the schools I was at, the Academy under Greg Nelson, he taught a variety of martial arts school.
Okay. I'm understanding now that you went from the wrestling to the mixed martial arts, and about 10 years ago, was it that you started competing in a mixed martial arts?
I started competing right away. I went from wrestling in college to being one of the top amateur fighters in the Midwest to finish, just growing as a martial artist. So I started, at a different gym before I got to the academy. Learned I was a wrestler. I didn't know anything but wrestling, at the time. So I'd take people down and just ground and pound. And then I switched to gyms and learned to Greg, and I learned more jiu-jitsu. I learned more kicking. I learned different elbows. I learned, that spinning back fists, flying knees. I learned that.
Right. Okay. When we talk about an MMA fight, right? All of those various methods of fighting are employed in those fights, right?
Correct.
So if I am a boxer and I'm in a boxing match, right? I can't kick you, for example.
No.
But if I'm in an MMA fight, I may punch you, I might kick you, I might choke you, short of biting, right?
Correct.
And the point of a mixed martial arts fight is to actually knock the person out, render him unconscious, right?
What you need, boss? Some wheels? I can bring them round.
We reference the cage match, right? And that's what we kind of think about when we think about mixed martial arts fights.
You got a cage fight, which you see.
I'll bring it to you.
Bellator, LFA, all things like that. And then you have martial art tournaments where it's just strictly jiu-jitsu. You're gi. You have blue belts, black belts, white belts, purple belts. They all compete at a level. No striking, just all grappling. Then you have the ones that are us in the cage. We do everything punching.
A professional career, right?
Correct.
And you had 11 professional fights?
Possibly. I don't even know how many fights I technically have. So.
You know the internet exists, right?
Yeah.
You know your statistics are saved.
Yeah.
All right. And so if I say that your professional record was 5 wins and 6 losses in 11 fights, would you disagree with that?
I think I might be 66. I think I'm actually 66.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you fight in an MMA fight, these kind of open freestyle fights, you fight in a weight class, right?
Correct.
People who are similar in terms of their weight, they may be taller, they may be shorter, but they're in the same weight class.
Correct.
Okay. But again, there's a referee, right?
Correct.
And certain fights, when you get someone into a submission hold, the referee may come and lift up the person's arm to see if they're conscious or unconscious, right?
That's correct.
That's a way of determining whether or not
that's if they're not moving. That's if they're not moving, if they're not fighting and stuff like that. Yeah, the referee has to make sure that the person is conscious. So he might say keep moving. If they're not moving, he might check. And sometimes the opponent will know that person's out. So the opponent will be looking at the ref like, look, he's out, things like that.
And sometimes you don't know that they're out, and that's why the ref comes and picks up the arm, right?
Most opponents know they put the person out.
But it's possible, right? It's a yes or no question.
It's possible.
All right.
How about that?
practice, right? And you also practiced these moves, right?
That's correct.
Rendering other people in practice unconscious.
That's correct.
And in your professional career, you are also at times have rendered people unconscious and been rendered unconscious yourself.
Correct.
Through one of these chokeholds.
Correct.
All right. Now, you described these chokeholds generally yesterday. These chokeholds, like you described an air choke and a blood choke.
Correct.
You remember your conversation about that yesterday?
Correct.
All right. So when you use these forms of chokeholds, whether it's an air choke or a blood choke, they use those in various forms of martial arts, right? Judo, Krav Maga. A chokehold is sort of across the board in terms of martial arts.
Correct.
With the exception of maybe the stick fighting, right?
Correct.
All right. And you testified that you, at your academy, you train with a lot of law enforcement officers, military people, and law enforcement from both state and federal levels, right?
That's correct.
And you said sometimes you don't even know that that's what they do, right?
That's correct.
And sometimes you get to know these guys because you're fighting with them, right? You're training with them, and tell me a little bit about their rules, right?
Sometimes, I mean, we build a brotherhood of the gym. You know, some people interact outside with personal life. Some people just interact in the gyms. You know, relationships I see on an everyday basis. Like at work, I go in and see you every day. I interact with you there. But I mean, I interact with you outside of work. You know,
right.
And that's something that I interact with outside of
okay.
the gym.
But I just want to make sure you've never officially been invited to go to like the Minneapolis Police Academy to train law enforcement in the use of force.
No.
Or the use of these chokeholds.
No.
And or any other police academy for that reason.
No, I witnessed my sensei, Greg Nelson.
I'm asking about you, sir. Have you ever officially been asked to train police officers specifically in the use of chokeholds?
No, just witnessed.
Okay. Now, air chokes. You described air chokes yesterday. Air chokes are from the front, correct?
Correct.
And that's because what you're doing is you're actually cutting off the air to the trachea, right? So you can render someone unconscious by coming from the front of the neck and cutting off their airway, which renders them unconscious.
Repeat that.
Sure. An air choke is a front choke, agreed?
Yeah.
And what you're doing in an air choke is you're cutting off the air supply or the oxygen supply from the front of the neck, correct? And in doing so, you can render a person unconscious, correct?
On an air choke, I'm not a medical person, so I won't answer that.
Okay. On a blood choke, right, what you're doing is you're cutting off, and you described yesterday, the blood supply to the brain, right?
Okay. Side choke. Correct.
A side choke. And you described several different types of chokeholds, like the rear naked chokehold, I think it's called, or the triangle. What you're doing is you're actually cutting off the blood supply to both sides of the neck in those.
Repeat that.
When you do a blood choke, what you're trained on generally is to limit the blood supply to both sides of the neck.
No, blood choke is to take one side of the neck.
It's just one side of the neck. Okay?
The blood choke is to attack the side of the neck. So I choke from here, side of the neck.
Right, but you're using your weight and you're actually cutting off both sides. You're using your body and your arm, right? And you're actually protecting the trachea or the airway in the crux of your neck.
You're mixing chokes up. You're mixing your air chokes and your blood chokes together. Air choke is to attack the trachea, side choke is to attack the side of the neck.
So if I have someone in a chokehold, right, and a blood chokehold using my arm, I may have my hand behind that person, right?
No, it's not. I'm attacking the side of the neck, not the trachea. You're attacking the trachea. I'm
I'm saying that the trachea is protected by the crux of the elbow. And so you're using the forearm and the bicep to cut off both sides of the blood.
Right. Ear to ear, from ear to ear. Right. It cuts off one side of the neck on the choke.
Okay. How long does that usually take in your experience to render someone unconscious?
You go unconscious on a blood choke within seconds. Some people don't even know that their body goes unconscious.
Right. You were interviewed by the FBI, right?
That is correct.
I believe it was Agent Garvey of the FBI, right? Are you looking at some notes to refresh your recollection?
I have it in front. That's correct.
Would that help? Would that help you refresh your recollection?
I mean, yeah, that's why I just opened up. Yeah, that's correct.
It's kind of weird. We have rules in court. You have to testify from your memory, not your notes. But if
it's
you need
not notes. I'm just looking. The name is on the front of the page.
What I'm saying is, if you need to refer to your whatever it is you have in front of you to help you refresh your recollection, we need to get permission from the court to do that. Right. It's a weird procedure that we.
I don't know his name, so I looked to see what his name was.
Okay. Would it help you remember his or her name if you looked at your paper in front of you?
That's correct. It's in the paper.
Your Honor, may he refer his notes?
Your notes silently.
Correct.
And once it's refreshed your memory, we'll close the notes back up and testify from your memory. Mr. Nelson.
Thank you.
What was the name one more time, sir?
I believe there were two agents there, right? One was from the BCA named Angela Garvey.
That one's correct.
And then Eckert is the last name of the other?
I believe that, yep, that's correct.
Okay. And you were interviewed by those agents on May the 29th of last year, correct?
Correct, I believe so.
Right. You wouldn't do, we have a transcript of that statement and the reports about it. Would you dispute me if I told you it was May 29th?
I don't regularly the dates.
Okay, fair enough. And do you recall them asking you about blood chokes and how long it takes to choke someone out?
Correct.
And you told them 3 to 5 seconds?
Correct. Just like I just told you within seconds.
And an MMA round is 3 minutes, right?
No, that's for amateurs. MMA round is 5-minute rounds. 3 minutes for amateurs, 5 minutes for pros.
All right. So 3 to 5 minutes are per round of an MMA fight.
Of an MMA fight.
Okay. Have you ever, whether it be in your training after you have rendered someone unconscious, where they come back to and they start fighting again?
Inside of a fight? That would choke someone out.
Variety of contexts, right?
That's correct.
So you've done some personal security for people?
Correct.
And you've done some kind of doorman stuff, right?
That's correct.
Bouncing, I guess, is what you would call it. And you said that you have worked alongside the Minneapolis Police Department in those club-type situations with off-duty officers and on-duty officers.
That's correct.
Okay. In that capacity, have you ever had to deal with a crowd of people?
That is correct.
Have you ever had to deal with a crowd of people that was upset?
Definitely.
Is it easier or harder to deal with a crowd that is upset?
Each person is different. Me, I'm able to deal with the high capacity of distractions, different things going on, and still be able to be professional and focus on what's going on in front of me.
Okay. And have you ever been involved in a situation where there's a crowd that's upset and you were afraid of them?
Correct.
I'd like to direct your attention to the incident on May 25th of 2020 that you've testified about. You were shown an exhibit yesterday that shows that you arrived at the Cup Foods on the 38th Street side of Cup Foods at 8:23 and 12 seconds.
Don't recollect the time, sir.
Would you like me to show you that exhibit, or would you agree that that's probably correct? I can show you the exhibit.
Show me the exhibit.
All right.
Hey there.
You're watching CBS and
Showing you
Minnesota.
exhibit 18.
This is Donald Williams. Are introducing an exhibit that was shown yesterday and asking Williams to
You
react.
can see that?
We'll take it back live.
This was already admitted into evidence yesterday. You would agree that exhibit 18 shows you walking along 38th Street on May 25th, 2020 at 8:23 and 12 seconds.
Correct.
Okay. So, I'm not trying to trick you, all right?
That's fine.
And it's fair to say that prior to your arrival there, you had no idea what had been going on in the area.
No, not at all. I said I just squad first.
Right. And you testified that as you kind of came around the corner, your energy sort of pulled you towards that incident, right?
That is totally correct.
So you would have absolutely no idea that an ambulance was called 3 minutes before you arrived.
Don't know anything about that.
You would have had no idea that an ambulance was stepped up to code 3, which means get here quick, 2 minutes before you arrived.
No regulations of any of that.
You weren't there, you wouldn't possibly know, right?
Wouldn't know at all.
Kind of basic test or experience as a security guard, your first inclination is to just sort of observe everything that's going on, right?
Totally correct.
And that's what you did.
That's what I felt like I did correct.
It's fair to say that you had not observed any prior contact between the Minneapolis Police Department and Mr. Floyd.
What I see.
You would have no idea that they had been dealing with him for 15 minutes prior to your arrival.
Nah,
No, right?
Can you still answer the question? Oh, repeat that for sure.
You were not aware that the police had been dealing with Mr. Floyd for 15 minutes prior to your arrival.
Not at all.
Now, you testified that as you were observing Mr. Floyd on the ground, you observed blood coming from his nose or mouth area, right?
Correct. Someone actually stated it.
Always room for improvement.
Right. I've watched the video.
Go easy.
But you would not have been aware that 3 minutes prior to your arrival, an ambulance was called specifically because he was bleeding from the mouth.
That had nothing to do with it.
But you made certain assumptions.
That it had nothing, regulations of it had nothing to do with it.
Sometimes court reporter can't hear something. That's the only reason for this comment, but Your Honor, appreciate you. Mr. Ellison.
Thank you.
Court reporter can't hear.
Assumptions.
That it had nothing, regulations of it had nothing to do with it.
Sometimes court reporter can't hear something. That's the only reason for this comment, but Your Honor, appreciate you. Mr. Ellison.
Thank you. But you yesterday testified that you assumed that the blood coming from Mr. Floyd's nose and mouth area was from his face being pushed into the cement.
I didn't say that.
There's no question. You answered my question.
Right, blood coming through his nose. I said blood's coming through his nose. I didn't say how I got there or where.
I'm going to ask you. That's non-responsive objection. You've answered my question, sir.
Stop. Objection is sustained. Jury disregard the last remark that was not in response to a question. Mr. Nelson.
Thank you. You testified that after the ambulance came, you saw 2 additional officers, right?
Correct.
And you, prior to that happening, had no idea that those 2 officers were back there, right?
Correct.
So it's fair to assume that you did not hear any of the conversations between the officers, correct?
Tower that let me get close enough. Correct.
The question is, the 3 officers with Mr. Floyd, yes or no?
No.
It's fair to say that as you were there, you grew angrier.
Correct.
Yes.
That's what you perceive.
Pardon?
I said, if that's what you took from the video, correct?
As you were there and interacting with Officer Tao and Officer Chauvin, you grew more and more upset. Would you agree with that?
Correct.
You grew angry, right?
I grew control and professionalism.
Again, you made a statement to Agents Garvey and Eckert. And in that statement you said, form of cross-examination. In that statement you said, like, I really wanted to beat the shit out of the police officers. You said that.
Yeah, I did. That's what I felt.
You were angry.
No, you can't paint me. I was angry. I was in a position where I had to be controlled professionalism. I wasn't angry because I stayed on the track.
Object is non-responsive.
Overruled. Next question.
Thank you. You started calling them names. Yes?
You heard it. Yeah, we heard
Right.
it.
You call him a tough guy, right?
You watched the video.
You call him a real man, right?
You watched the video.
You do have to answer the question, yes.
Right?
You watched the video.
You call him a real man, right?
You watched the video.
You do have to answer the question, yes or no, based on what he's asking.
I'm going to ask you that again, so your answers should be yes or no, right?
Yes.
You called him a tough guy.
Okay.
You called him a real man.
Based on what he's asking.
I'm going to ask you that again, so your answers should be yes or no, right?
Yes.
You called him a tough guy. You called him a real man.
Okay.
You called him such a man.
Okay.
You called him bogus.
I did.
You called him a bum at least 13 times.
That's what you counted in the video?
That's what I counted.
And that's what you got, 13.
And that was early on, right? Those terms grew more and more angry. Would you agree with that?
They grew more and more pleading for life.
All right. After you called him a bum 13 times, you called him a fucking bum.
That's what you heard?
Did you say that?
Is that what you heard?
I'm asking you, sir. Did you say that?
You heard that. I'm pretty sure you did.
You call him a fucking pussy-ass bitch.
That's what you heard. I'm sure that's
I'm
what
asking you, did you say that?
That's what the video records. What I did.
You called him a bitch.
That's the video he heard from the video.
It's a yes or no, sir.
If that's who was heard in the video, yes, I did.
And at one point, you said that Officer Tao pushed you.
That's correct. He put his hand in my chest. That's what I said.
And you observed Officer Tao push someone else, right? Or feel like he he push someone else?
I didn't let him touch anyone else.
Do you recall saying, I dare you to touch me like that, and I swear I'll slap the fuck out of both of you? So again, sir, it's fair to say that you grew angrier and angrier.
I grew possession staying in my body. Can't be enough to get angry.
You were not standing, you were walking around, right?
Correct. Patrol.
And at times, you would go forward towards where Officer Chauvin was, right?
Correct.
And at times you'd walk to the side, correct?
Well, I didn't really get too close to Officer Chauvin, actually. Tyler did not allow me to get close to Officer Chauvin.
You attempted to walk closer.
I stepped off the curb and I stepped back on the curb.
Because Officer Tao didn't permit you to go forward.
He said step back on the curb.
Your voice, right? You weren't just saying you're a bum. Would you agree with that?
He said I wasn't just saying.
Right. The tone of your voice.
The tone of my voice was loud, so people could hear me.
And it grew louder and louder.
So I could be heard.
And after Mr. Floyd was taken by the ambulance, you continued to interact with Officer Tao as well as other people on the scene, correct?
That's correct. After they retreated, that retreat, I said what I said. They can say more to me.
And you continued to yell these types of things after Mr. Floyd was gone, right?
Mr. Tao, that word, that's important. Correct.
And I think you said something about hoping he would shoot himself.
No, I didn't say I hope he's going to shoot himself. I said within the next 2 years, you will shoot yourself in your head for what you did. I didn't say hope. I don't hope that for me anymore. Nobody would go out and shoot yourself. I said within the next 2 years, you will shoot yourself in your head for what you did. I didn't say hope. I don't hope that for me anymore. Nobody would go out.
So again, you continued to engage with these officers, right?
Tom.
And your voice was loud, right?
He tried to intimidate me. So
the officers, most of the officers were on the other side of 38th Street.
Me and Tao were standing in front of each other.
At one point, Officer Tao goes across the street as well, right?
They both had a retreat, correct.
And you continued to yell these same types of things.
Probably correct. Wasn't being heard.
And it was over and over and over and over again, right?
Because I wasn't being heard.
It's a yes or no question, sir. Was it over and over and over again?
Yes, because I wasn't being heard.
Thank you, sir. I have no further questions.
Any redirect?
Paren, esperen ahí. Why can't you assholes be on time for once, eh? Time's out, let's go.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I have a few more questions for you.
Okay. Get over there. They will bring it soon. Go on.
In MMA fighting, do you ever have a situation where your opponent is handcuffed behind the back? Do you ever have a situation in MMA where there are 3 people fighting against 1?
Never.
And when you were on the scene at 38th in Chicago on May 25th of last year, when you were watching this interaction between these 4 Minneapolis police officers and Mr. Floyd, were you watching a cage match at the time?
Well, I only seen 2 of them, so I was watching more of a campaign shit show.
Okay.
Well, I only seen 2 of them,
was being murdered. And that is a line that the judge at the beginning of the trial had said he did not want to let Williams testify as to cause of death. And so that's why the multiple objections, that's why the halting testimony is trying to get to what is allowed. We saw even there was some debate as to whether or not there would be an argument.
Oh, gosh.
Right now, Joe, is my read on this correct, that this is an argument over how far Matt Frank is allowed to push Donald Williams towards essentially speculating on what caused George Floyd's death?
Good morning, Jason. Yes, that's correct, because the judge ruled on March 24th that Mr. Williams can talk about his training and what he's done with mixed martial arts, but he can't go as far as saying these holds by Mr. Chauvin on Mr. Floyd caused Mr. Floyd's death. And he's sort of been saying that, but really hasn't been objected to.
Yeah, he was allowed to say that he called 911 because he thought that he was witnessing a murder, which I was a little surprised it went that far.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I am surprised too. He's been saying witnessing a murder, he's been saying lack of air, he's been saying lack of blood, what could happen to a person if these things occurred to them. So he's basically been saying that, even though the judge ruled last week that he shouldn't be.
As a defense attorney, do you sort of make a decision from a strategy standpoint that you're going to let some stuff go because you don't want perhaps the jury to think that you're being combative with a likable witness?
No, you should be combative regardless of the witness because you're trying to protect the rights of your client. That's what
Joe,
the defense attorney is supposed to do.
I'm going to cut you off right there, Joe, because we're getting back to the redirect now. We'll take you back to the court.
Side Joe uses consciousness, and I feel like he processes consciousness also from the condition of a fish in a bag. So overall. So, like I said before earlier, he reminded me of one fish in a bag.
So let me ask it this way then.
The last no will be stricken about the fish in the bag.
And so then, I'm sorry. So you were concerned about Mr. Floyd losing his life?
Correct.
I have nothing further.
Maybe process.
You were asked a series of questions on redirect about your experience in mixed martial arts.
Correct.
Can you tell me about any of the conversations that you had as you were being rendered unconscious in any of your fights?
What did you do that?
The objection is overruled. You may answer if you have a recollection as to any time. Ask the question again, but don't answer until I say so.
When you were engaged in mixed martial arts, in your fights, in your competitive fights, can you tell me, were you able to have a conversation with your opponent as you were being rendered unconscious? Yes or no?
All features, no.
Nothing further.
You said earlier you're not a medical doctor.
That's totally correct.
If Mr. Nelson is asking you whether a person can...
Stop. You're not allowed to give a medical opinion. Stop.
Totally correct.
If Mr. Nelson is asking you whether a person can...
Stop. You're not allowed to give a medical opinion. Mr. Frank is going to ask you about your personal experience. If you have such a personal experience, you can talk about your personal experience. Nothing more. Mr. Frank, please phrase it in terms of his personal experience, not an opinion.
I will, Your Honor. In a mixed martial arts fight, when you are being rendered unconscious in a chokehold, you tap out, correct?
Correct.
And that's to prevent it from going too far.
Correct.
And the tap out is the communication you use to your opponent to say, hey, let up.
That's correct.
And your opponent has to follow that communication.
That's correct.
That's the rules of the fight.
That's the rule of the fight.
And so when you tap out, you know it's done, and it stops.
Correct. Yeah. Only time you verbally.
I have nothing further.
Mr. Williams, you are excused. Thank you.
So about an hour of additional testimony from Donald Williams now done. Day 2 of the Derek Chauvin trial. You're watching live coverage right here on CBSN Minnesota. This live feed coming from the Hennepin County Courthouse in downtown Minneapolis. Peter Cahill on the stand.
Members of the jury, our next 4 witnesses are going to be persons who, because of their age, I am allowing them not to be on the video broadcast. Obviously, you will be able to see them in the courthouse. But just so you know what is going on in this courtroom, your video will not be shown. Further, when they give their name and spell their names for the record, that will be off the audio that is being broadcast outside this courtroom. Just so you know what the general public is seeing, you will, of course, see and hear everything. I'm also allowing, contrary to what is often in the rules of decorum that we operate under, that they can refer to other people who are at the scene by their first names, as opposed to Mr. or Ms. That's with court permission. They're not violating anything by doing so. So with that, the state will be bringing in its next witness. There will be 4 in a row, probably. We're not going to get to all of them before we take a break. Probably one at most. Okay, thank you. Okay.
And so prosecutors will bring in 4 witnesses today. All either were juveniles at the time of last summer, George Floyd being taken into custody, and Derek Chauvin with his knee on his neck. 4 juveniles at that time. 2 are adults. 1 is the person who shot the video that has been most widely seen. And that video will likely be introduced into evidence today, and I presume it will be played for the jury. Just as yesterday, an extended amount of video was played for the jurors, many of whom had said they had never seen
Kids are the stars who light up our universe. And these champions of children's health are committed to a highly specialized and compassionate level of care to make sure a child's light continues to shine bright. But they can't do it alone. Join WCCO in supporting Children's Minnesota's mission by adding your starlight to a child's constellation of care. Donate today at WCCO.com/brighter so we can all shine brighter together.
Jen, why'd you do it?
Running. I had to get back.
Aha. Oof. Oh.
To switch to Augsburg Fairview Academy for my 12th grade year.
So you most certainly remember the date of May 25th of last year.
Yes.
I want to take you to a certain time period on May 25th at around 7 o'clock p.m. on May 25th. Do you recall walking to Cup Foods?
Yes.
And were you by yourself?
No.
Were you walking with a cousin of yours?
Yes.
Do you recall how old your cousin was?
Maybe 12, I'm not sure.
Maybe not.
Maybe.
Now you're walking to Cup Foods. Where were you walking from?
Home.
So you live nearby?
Yes.
Would you describe Cup Foods as the neighborhood store?
Yes.
Now the jury may have heard something about this being a dangerous neighborhood. Were you concerned for your safety in walking with your cousin to Cup Foods?
No.
If you had to estimate, how many times would you say you walked to Cup Foods from your home in the neighborhood?
Hundreds, maybe even thousands.
So you and your cousin walk into Cup Foods. What were you going there for? Do you remember?
I was taking her to get some snacks.
Your cousin loves snacks?
Yes.
So let's go to May 25th of 2020, and I want to show you a couple of things just to set the scene for our discussion. I want to show you what's been marked for identification purposes, for our purposes, as Exhibit 13. Your Honor, I think I need a hand. Okay, I got one. Now in Exhibit 13, do you see two people in that, in what is a photograph?
Yes, but I also see two people back there. That counts.
Right, you see two people in the front of the photo and two people at the back.
Yes.
Is this photo a true and accurate depiction of you and your cousin in the front of the photograph on May 25th?
Yes.
Your Honor, out for Exhibit 13 and evidence.
13 is received. Would you like me to publish?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. All right, now the jury can see it too. Now this is a screen that you can actually mark on. And so if we see the two people that are right here in the front of this picture, there's a little girl with the word love on her sweatshirt, and there's another person next to her. One of those persons you?
Yes.
And which one? The bigger one or the little?
The bigger one.
And this is your cousin next to you?
Yes.
And is this as you walk into to Cup Foods?
Yes.
I want to show you what we've marked as Exhibit 16 for the trial. You can pull that up. Now, is this a video that you've seen before?
Yes.
Do you have personal knowledge of the scene that's depicted in this exhibit?
Yes.
Is this video a true and accurate depiction of the scene as you saw it on May 25th of 2020?
Yes.
Your Honor, the state offers Exhibit 16 in that.
16 is received.
So, Mr. Eltis, if you could play this a little ways, I want to ask you some questions about it. So we can see with the jury, two people walking from the left to the right. There's a little girl in a green shirt, and there you are. Do you see her?
Yes.
And is this as you all were approaching Cup Foods on May 25th?
Yes.
Now see there, your cousin goes into the store. Why did she go into the store and then you turned around and then came back toward the squad cars?
I wanted to make sure she got in.
Stop here for a second. When you walked past the squad car there, did you see anything happening there on the ground as you were walking towards Cup Foods with your cousin?
Yes, I see a man on the ground and